We ended up getting a question from Mike Reiss on YouTube. He just quickly wanted to know, who are your role models and how did they shape the man that you've become?
I had regular people who were my role models. Initially, I had role models. Tony Dorsett was the reason why I played football. He's the reason why I played running back. So from an athletic standpoint, he was the guy. But I had just regular. A lawyer is the one who told me to go to law school, and he's a friend of mine, and if he didn't do that, my life would have been completely different. So I have all these role models. The number one role model was my mother. I would see the relationships that she built with people, just the most innocent relationships, and so she's the one who steeped in me the ability to build relationships. My brother and I both have that ability, and then the desire. That's the most valuable thing we have with people, are the relationships we have with them. So those just ordinary people are those who I looked up to a lot of the time.
And then another question here, and this one kind of will get into the solution. So I'm going to ask this one, and then you can carry right on into some of the solutions, and it may actually be a solution for you. But Phyllis Harrell asked, how do we weed out the good police officers from the bad one? And I kind of had a comment on that. I talked to Dev earlier about this. There are good cops, and we always talk about that 100%. There's probably way more good cops than there are bad cops. But for those good cops, not only how do we weed the bad ones out, but then how do good cops do that? Like, is there a safe space and is there a policy that, hey, if a good cop realizes, hey, there's another guy in my department, he's not doing things the right way, but if it's not an environment, or there's an environment that he feels like, hey, if I complain, I may just lose my job and nothing will happen. How do we go about creating that safe space or creating policy in which that transparency is welcomed and open?
That's a great question, and there is no consistency with it. It varies from agency to agency. The level of safety varies from agency to agency. But that comes from leadership. You know, leadership at the top has got to say, we are going to be accountable. We're going to be accountable for what we do. So there has got to be, this is all about culture. How do you shift culture from being the protective culture to being the transparent culture? And when we get to the place where we're a transparent culture, then we're going to have trust that builds up. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to have trust that builds up. But it comes from leadership. From the top down, leadership has to build a culture that reinforces and encourages that there is accountability. And once you have that, that's the long game stuff. Again, long game. When you build that culture, you're building a long game. When you sweep it under the carpet, I don't want to do it, ignorance is bliss, that's a short game. That short game catches up to you if you don't handle that long game. We need to immediately stop being silent. That is the number one solution that we have to look at. No longer is silence acceptable in society. It's not. And that's what the protesters are saying. We can no longer have silence. There were 3 people who were silent and those were the 3 people who had the ability to save Mr. Floyd's life, and they were silent. The 3 other officers, they didn't do anything. Every bit of energy that was coming from the community could not save Mr. Floyd's life, no matter what they did, because if they went and tackled the officer who had his knee on his neck, they would have been arrested, and who knows what would have happened. So the only 3 people who could have saved Mr. Floyd's life were those 3 officers. No silence anymore. Cannot happen. It's unacceptable. And that's the number one solution that I'm telling people. They must create a culture that allows them not to have any silence.